Et yorana itotato nei farerida. Donc on va commencer cette rencontre avec les experts du Matari'i présents avec nous. Donc je souhaiterais au nom de l'institution saluer, au nom des membres de notre Assemblée, saluer Madame la Consul générale de Nouvelle-Zélande, Felicity Roxburgh. Saluer également le professeur Rangianehu Matamua d'une université de Nouvelle-Zélande, expert dans le domaine du Matari'i, et saluer également Matari'i qui est un expert également et qui représente le ministère des Affaires étrangères de Nouvelle-Zélande. Merci pour vos présences respectives. Vous avez ici dans l'hémicycle, de manière assez clairsemée, des représentants de l'Assemblée, mais également des chefs de service, le chef de service de la culture, le président de l'Académie marquisienne qui est présent également parmi nous, Tuti. Et puis vous avez également une délégation de Manura, de Paea, de ma commune, qui s'est jointe à nous parce que depuis que nous avons été élus, donc en 2020, nous avons célébré Matari'i dans la commune de Paea et je les ai invités pour qu'ils soient un peu plus formés sur ce type d'événement et surtout sur le cérémonial qui encadre cet événement. Donc je vais laisser la parole à notre traducteur pour essayer de reprendre les petits propos que j'ai eus pour traduire ça en anglais. Maruru.
Alors, du coup, je ne suis pas traducteur, juste animateur. La traduction est faite simultanément par Yann avec les écouteurs, avec le casque. Et la prochaine intervention, c'est celle de, justement, notre consul général de Nouvelle-Zélande qui va faire une petite intervention avant que j'introduise Monsieur Matamua.
Monsieur le Président de l'Assemblée, Madame la Vice-présidente du gouvernement de la Polynésie française, chers élus, Ro rangatirama, tena koutou kato. Merci pour l'opportunité de vous adresser aujourd'hui au nom du consulat de la Nouvelle-Zélande. J'ai le grand honneur d'accompagner cette délégation des experts culturels maoris qui vont vous parler aujourd'hui de la célébration de Matari'i en Nouvelle-Zélande, et qui montre à tel point nos liens culturels, linguistiques, humains sont vivants de nos jours pendant qu'on fasse des reconnexions avec Tahiti, avec Raiatea, avec la Polynésie. C'est une collaboration importante. De nos jours, il y a d'autres collaborations entre la Nouvelle-Zélande et la Polynésie, et je voulais juste citer quelques-uns. Il y a eu un accord signé entre nos deux parlements en 2019. Il y a un fort commerce avec la Nouvelle-Zélande qui augmente à 15 milliards de francs pacifiques chaque année. Il y a eu des visites de haut niveau, y compris une visite en Nouvelle-Zélande pour le French Pacific Business Day. Il y a d'autres échanges politiques. Et je voulais juste citer qu'on est ensemble, on est membre du Forum des îles du Pacifique. Et ça, c'est quelque chose qui est très important pour la Nouvelle-Zélande, qu'on puisse continuer de collaborer en tant que membre du Forum pour œuvrer pour une région plus stable, en paix, prospère. Et la Polynésie, elle fait membre de tout ça. Donc, on vous encourage de continuer de suivre le forum et de se rejoindre à nous pour une collaboration. Mais il y a beaucoup encore à faire entre la Nouvelle-Zélande, Aotearoa et la Polynésie. On peut plus faire sur les champs comme la biodiversité, on peut harmoniser nos normes et nos standards. Il y a plein de choses à créer ensemble. Pour la Nouvelle-Zélande, on cherche à être un voisin fiable, long terme, stable de la Polynésie, comme on a toujours été en fait. Et puis tout ça, bien sûr, c'est fondé sur ces liens culturels, linguistiques ancestrale qu'on est là pour partager aujourd'hui. Donc, la visite de la délégation, c'est juste un petit exemple de toute notre c'est plus collaboration, c'est tout notre partage culturel. Donc, je vous souhaite bonne séance. Merci pour l'opportunité de vous adresser aujourd'hui et marururoa.
Avant de laisser la parole à notre professeur, je vais me permettre de l'introduire un petit peu. Donc, dans la culture polynésienne, on ne comprend pas que des expressions comme être dans la lune ou avoir la tête dans les étoiles puissent avoir un sens péjoratif. C'est vraiment juste une représentation de l'extérieur, puisque, après tout, la voûte céleste a toujours eu du sens pour nous. Elle nous guide, nous rassure, nous parle, et nos tupunas savaient les écouter. Nous allons confirmer tout cela avec le professeur Rangianehu Matamua, titulaire d'un doctorat, officier de l'ordre du mérite de Aotearoa, membre de la Société royale de Aotearoa, et également Tohunga Kokorangi, spécialiste en astronomie culturelle maorie, qui va partager avec nous ses connaissances autour de la thématique de Matari'i. Je vais maintenant laisser la parole au professeur. C'est à vous, professeur Matamua.
Mr. Speaker, Madam Vice President, esteemed members of this institution, ka nui te mihi ki a koutou katoa. He rere ana te mihi o mātou te hunga kua tai mai i Aotearoa ki konei, ki te wāhi e kia nei, ko te pū manawa o ngā iwi puta noi te moana nui ākiwa, tēnā koutou katoa. It is a great privilege for us to be here and to be welcomed here to give our understanding and share our practice of Matari'i firstly, and secondly to also discuss how we went through a process to make Matari'i an official public holiday in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So again, thank you all very much. There are a couple of things that I want to start with. Number one is we are really aware of the fact that our practices and our language and our culture, including Matari'i and the way we practice, originate from here. Our people left the warmth of these beautiful islands to the frigid, cold conditions of the South Pacific, but our culture still originates from this place. Secondly, I really want to impress upon you that we are here to share openly and with humility our understanding of the practice of Matari'i. However, our desire is that you take away with you what you feel is appropriate from what we share, and as part of your own endeavours to revive the practice of Matari'i in the proper and Tahitian manner in which it's celebrated. So in all my presentations, I think it's very important to talk about the origins of knowledge. The knowledge that I have and has been part of the sharing of Matari'i in Aotearoa begins with this gentleman who's seated in this photo, the elder man. That is my great-great-grandfather, who in the late 1800s compiled a manuscript that has over 1,000 Māori star names and 103 constellations. He comes from a place called Ruatahuna, which is in the heart of the North Island, in a very isolated community that's covered in bush and has no ocean. And he compiled his manuscript, which was handed on to my grandfather, who is also in this photo, which was handed on to me. That manuscript has been something that I have worked with since I was 20 years old, and something that has become my life's work along the journey of sharing traditional Maori astronomical knowledge, which has been the document that has fed into the establishment of our national Matari'i holiday in Aotearoa. So, Matari'i, just in brief, or the Pleiades, and every part on the map that you can see, it has a connection right around the world, from Europe through to Asia, Africa, North and South America, into Japan, Australia, and throughout the Pacific. Matari'i, or the Pleiades, is a cluster of stars that is celebrated by virtually every single culture. In southern France, it's painted on the cave, the cluster of Matari'i. That cave painting is the earliest record of any star knowledge, 17,000 years old, and it was used across all of these cultures as a marker of time, of harvest, of celebration, of environment, and it was used to celebrate the bounty of the year and to look for the future. And here in the Pacific and throughout Polynesia, it is very well known and practiced right throughout the various islands. This is the 9 names, Greek names, for the constellation of the Pleiades, as seen in the northern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, in Aotearoa, we see the stars like this. It's the other way around. And the record that I was left by my ancestor and what we practice in Aotearoa is a record of 9 stars within the cluster of Matari'i. Now, there is some question around the number of stars in the cluster that are visible. Across the ancient world, there are records of 5, 7, 9. The Prophet Muhammad had 12 and named each individually. There's even a record of 15. And a lot of factors come into being when you're talking about stars, location, air pollution, exactly where you are, and just the ability of people to view the night sky. In modern times, we've lost the ability to see into the skies like our forebears, because we spend most of our time looking at the television or a computer or our phones, whereas our ancestors spent a lot of time staring out across the ocean and staring into the stars, and they had the ability to see a lot more than we can. My ancestor records 9 stars in the cluster. This is an artistic representation of how Maori see those stars. The central star in the cluster is Matari'i. Matari'i gives her name to the entire cluster as well. She is the mother of the other 8 children who surround her, and each and every one of them brings a bounty to us every year. The father of the stars in the cluster is Rehua, the star Antares. We look for Matari'i to rise in the early morning sky in the middle of winter. When Matari'i is rising on the eastern horizon just before the sun, while Antares or Rehua is setting on the western horizon at the same time, we believe that the 8 children bestow a benefit or a cultural practice or something really important to our well-being. The eldest in the cluster is this star here, Pōhutukawa. Pōhutukawa is said to be the star that guides our dead across the night sky. Night after night, month after month. I'll come back to Pōhutukawa towards the end of this presentation. Next is Tipuānuku. Tipuānuku means to grow in the ground. I'm pretty sure you have that word tupu or tipu here, to grow or shoot. So anything that grows in our gardens is associated to that star. We have Tipuārangi, which means to grow in the sky. Maori have a very long history of eating birds out of the forest, and that is a star that's connected to that practice. We have Waiti. Waiti is the star of fresh water, and so all of the creatures in our rivers and our lakes, one of our big food sources in traditional times and remains that way today is freshwater eel, and so we continue to eat that in great quantities. Waitā is the next star, which is connected to salt water and the oceans. Waipunarangi is the star that's associated to rain. Ururangi is wind. And the final star is Hiwaiterangi. That is the star that's connected to the future and connected to the wishes of the year. And we believe that when Matari'i rises, we send our wishes into the sky in order for them to come true. So you can see in this image, Matari'i is surrounded by her children. Each and every one of them has a connection to us, and they feed into her. And the domain of Matari'i, the central star, is well-being. So this is a star that reflects the well-being of the environment and the well-being of people. The Tipuānuku and Tipuārangi, these are food stars. So food above and food below, the earth and the sky. We have fresh water and salt water, Waiti and Waitā. And fresh water always flows downhill to salt water. That's why they're in these positions. We have rain and winds, Waipunarangi and Ururangi, which are our weather stars. And we have Pōhutukawa and Hiwa, the eldest and the youngest, life and death, the beginning of the new year, the end of the old year. This one carries our dead across the night sky. This one here is connected to our desires, hopes and wishes for the impending year. All of these feed into the well-being of the entire world and all of the people because of their connection to their mother, which is the star Matari'i in the cluster of Matari'i. For Maori, we believe that the name Matari'i comes from the phrase Matari'i or Matari'i. Mata, eyes, ariki, chief. At the separation of the world, when the sky was separated from the earth, our gods warred with each other. I don't think that warring between some of us has finished, but they warred with each other. And one of the gods that was in disagreement is the god of weather, Tāwhiri Mātea. Tāwhiri plucked his eyes out and crushed them in his hands, threw them to the chest of his father, and they stuck there. Ngā mata o te ariki Tāwhiri Mātea, the eyes of the god Tāwhiri Mātea. That name is truncated to become Matari'i, and now we say Matari'i. and that's our origins of the name. We look towards the eastern sky early in the morning before the sun comes up. When we find this constellation, we look for Orion's belt, and this is how they sit on our horizon. And we come left, we come to the face of Taurus the bull. This is known as the kokota. And if we come a little further left, this is how we find Matari'i. The positions of the stars for us will be slightly different to how you see them here, based on our longitude. But this is the marker that we look for. And for us, our Matari'i celebrations happen in the middle of winter. So that's a winter constellation for us. And it's when it rises, it will determine when we begin our new year. We have the sun. You're going to have to forgive me, some of these animations aren't moving. But we have the sun, who is the marker for us of season. The sun moves between his two wives, his summer wife, Hine Raumati, and his winter wife, Hine Takurua. And when he is rising next to his winter wife, that's when we know it's the correct season to celebrate Matari'i. I'm going to skip through some of these because they're not working. Here we go. So this is what we will look for in the morning. Do you see Matari'i rising early in the morning, just before the sun comes up in the morning sky? And that for us is our marker of the Māori New Year. Here is a photo of the markers that we look for to determine when we celebrate Matari'i. And this is going to be very important. This became very important for us in Aotearoa, because this is how we worked out the dates where we celebrate Matari'i in Aotearoa. Maori, and I would go out on a limb and say Polynesians follow a similar calendar. It's driven by the moon, but also takes into account the stars and the position of the sun, and builds into the calendar system flowering of tree, spawning of fish, migration of bird, all of these other environmental factors. What we do as Māori is we now practice our culture within a Gregorian Western calendar framework. So we now make our cultural practices fit within a solar Gregorian sun-driven calendar system, and quite often they don't match. We went back to a traditional calendar system to determine our dates for Matari'i. And this is how we traditionally worked out when to celebrate Matari'i. I'm looking at the sky here, looking out towards the northeast. The first sign I'm looking for is the position of the sun. And the red arrow showing me where the sun is rising, I know that's rising in the northeast, so I know it's winter. Then the two signs I'm looking for are these two here. These stars, this is Pipiri. So I can tell Pipiri is rising just before the sun. For Māori in Aotearoa, Pipiri is the name of the first month of the year. So I know I'm in the correct month of the correct season. The sun is rising towards the north, it's winter. When Pipiri's in the sky just before the sun, we are in the correct month. And then I look for the correct lunar phase. So I'm in the correct season of the correct month, and I'm looking for the last quarter lunar phase, For us, that's Tangaroa, the Tangaroa lunar phases. And this gives me the correct day of the correct month of the correct season where I should be looking for Matari'i. So these are the environmental, astronomical markers that determine when we should be looking for Matari'i. I'll come back to that because I want to perhaps just touch briefly on how we worked out the dates. But when I see these markers, I know in my environment that it's cold. You won't suffer from this problem here, the snows and the frost, but this is something that is connected to our Matari'i. This is where communities and families will go out in the early morning and look for Matari'i rising to begin the new year and to celebrate. This is a kukupa for us, uupa, I believe here, rupe also for us, a keriru, our wood pigeon. This is a season that this bird is fat and harvested, and we also took the lamprey during this season. So what I'm showing in this image is how Matari'i is connected to weather, how Matari'i is connected to the gathering of people, and how Matari'i is connected to the environment. All of these factors come into play when we acknowledge Matari'i. Matari'i is driven and celebrated with a traditional ceremony. The name of the ceremony is hautapu, the hautapu ceremony. A hautapu is a sacred food offering. What we would do is we go out into the environment and we collect something from our garden that is associated to Tipu Anuku, the star that's connected to the earth and gardens. We go out and get a bird from the forest that's connected to Tipu Arangi. We'll get an eel or something, a freshwater fish that's connected to Waiti. And we will get a fish or something from the ocean connected to Waita. We will put those in a umu and we will heat the rocks, put the food into the umu, cover it, and we'll wait for Matari'i to rise. When Matari'i appears in the morning sky, like it is there, the first thing we do is just as the sun is rising, right at this moment, as we'll begin a number of incantations or prayers, our karakia. The first karakia is to the dead of the year. We believe that Matari'i carries our dead across the year, for a whole year, carries our dead across the night sky. Matari'i at the moment is starting to set with the sun. We believe when Matari'i sets about the month of May, it takes our dead to the underworld to be prepared, and we wait for Matari'i to return. When Matari'i returns in the morning sky, just before the rising of the sun, we believe that's the moment that we say a farewell to our dead before their spirits become stars in the sky. The first part of the ceremony is where we gather together and we call out all of the names of the people who have passed since the last rising of Matari'i. We weep for them, we honour their memories, and we send them on their journey to become stars in the sky. That's the first part of the ceremony. The second part is we uncover the oven and all of the steam rises out of the oven. And we take the food and place it on an altar, and we do karakia or prayers over the altar and over the food to honour the environment for all it has given us through the last year, in the hopes that it will continue to bless us with bounty for the coming year. So that's the second part of the ceremony. The final part is where we look to Matari'i. The way that Matari'i appears in the morning sky will determine what our year is going to be like. If Matari'i is bright and clear and all the stars in the cluster are visible to see, it's going to be a prosperous and good year. But if they're clustered, hard to read, hazy, they don't appear clear and they seem to move, then it is a sign for us that it's going to be a lean year. And this is the practice of Matari'i. Soon as the ceremony was finished in the morning, it began a period of mass celebration, feasting, dancing, enjoyable activities, games, people coming together, staying together as whānau or as family, as communities, and spending not just one day. Matari'i for us is an extended period of time. In fact, it lasts for a month. When we were setting up the holiday, I asked if we could have a month off, but the New Zealand government gave us 1 day. This is where Matari'i began. Matari'i didn't begin with the New Zealand government creating a holiday. Matari'i has always been practiced, and it was maintained by communities like the one you see on the screen. It was the community groups, it was the schools, the early childhood centres, it was the university groups, it was environmental groups that came together to celebrate Matari'i every year. So it has been a very ground up approach, and in fact in the last 30 years, groups from across the country and Maori groups have been celebrating Matari'i. Then in 2020, with the re-election of the Labour government into their second term at that time, they proposed making Matari'i a public holiday. And to do something like that, they decided that they needed a group, an advisory committee or a steering committee. And I was asked to chair this group, and this is our Matari'i Advisory Committee. These are Māori experts and practitioners of star law within Aotearoa, and I do want to quickly name them. To the top left is Dr. Pauline Harris, Professor Pauline Harris, who is the only Māori astrophysicist, who is a scientist and still practices traditional Māori star knowledge. In the centre at the top is ocean navigator Jack Thatcher, who has been central in the regeneration of the practice of Māori ocean navigation and the building of canoes. Next to him is Dr. Ruakere Hond. Dr. Ruakere Hond is a cultural practitioner and expert and descends from Turi from Raiatea. On the bottom left is Victoria Campbell, who's a star practitioner. Beside her is Hoturo Kerr, who's one of the leading navigators and waka experts in Aotearoa. Next to him is Rereata Mākiha, who is our country's leading expert in lunar calendar systems. And collectively, we came together and we were charged with doing 3 things. Number 1, we were charged with establishing the values, the principles and purpose of Matari'i. Number 2, we were asked to come up with the dates with which Matari'i would be practiced. And number 3, we were asked to put together a comprehensive education, information, and promotion package to help share knowledge of Matari'i to the entire population. These are the three principles of Matari'i upon which we built the holiday. We didn't have to come up with these principles, they already existed in the practice. These principles come out of the traditional celebration. First and foremost, it's a time of remembrance. It's a time where we honour those who have passed since the last rising of Matari'i. And we remember our forebearers, the lessons that they gave us, and the hopes and desires that they left to us. The second is celebrating the present. So it's coming together, feasting, celebrating one another, sharing with each other. It's a time where we put all of the difficulties of the past year aside, all of our disagreements at times, all of the tough, difficult things that we've had to come through, and we come together to celebrate and share and share in each other's company. And the final principle is the future. Matari'i is a time where we plan what we're going to do for the next year. So we come together and think about how we are going to develop new projects, or how we're going to look after our environment, or how we're going to care for one another. While these are the major principles, Matari'i is underpinned by some basic values that speak to the best parts of who we are as people. It's underpinned by aroha, or love for one another, sharing, and our connection to the environment. I can't stress that enough. The environmental connection is crucial within the celebration of Matari'i. When we came up with the dates, we decided that we would not be driven by the Western Gregorian calendar. What we did is we identified the correct season, the correct month, and the correct lunar period. And then we made the Matari'i day fall within that correct period. And this is where it became quite technical, because we all deal across the world with a 365-day-long solar calendar system. What we're trying to do is make our lunar calendar, which is only 354 days long, fit into a Western 365-day calendar system. So, in essence, our calendar system that our ancestors followed is 11 days shorter every year than a solar calendar, which in 2 years is 22 days shorter, and in 3 years it's a whole month shorter. What our ancestors would do is every 3 or so years they would add an extra month into the calendar. Intercalation, a leap month, is exactly the same as how we have a leap day in our Western calendar every year. And so that's the practice that we followed. And we have followed, our Matari'i dates will shift every year against the Western Gregorian calendar. So it will either be July or June. It will shift up and down the calendar system. It's exactly the same as Easter. The reason Easter shifts up and down the calendar is because Easter is based on a traditional Jewish lunar calendar, and we've had to make it fit within a Western solar calendar system. So that's what we've done with our Matari'i dates, and there's a reason that it shifts up and down the calendar system. And because we're already used to applying Easter, it wasn't much of an issue at home. And the education promotion program has been something that I've brought some members along as part of the delegation who are sitting in the front row here, who have been crucial in the promotion of Matari'i through education, through online promotions. This is our logo. Each of those crosses, that's lattice work, that's designs taken from our traditional houses, represents the different stars in Matari'i. This flag, it's an actual flag, flies over the Parliament and over our Parliament during Matari'i. It's flowing all over the country at this time. We have adverts on television and a whole program online, across social media in particular, to celebrate Matari'i. Once we had developed out all of these principles and values and the dates, and we were developing out the educational program, we went through a select committee process as part of our process in Aotearoa. That process was led by the minister at the time, Kiritapu Allen, with the support of other ministers, also Minister Michael Woods, and a number of the Māori ministers. And it went through a select committee process. It went through the first reading, and it went through second reading, and there were some select committee processes where we had to come together and answer questions from different ministers. If I can say that the entire House, the New Zealand Parliament, agreed that it was a good idea to have a Matari'i holiday in Aotearoa. They agreed in principle, but there was issues around the cost of the holiday. There were issues from some parties around how much the holiday would cost us. And there was an estimation that the holiday would cost the country in the vicinity of $300 million. That aside, we continued to work with the Parliament, and it went to the final reading, and it was accepted and it was passed as a bill into the House in early 2020. It became bill, it became a legislation, and then an act was written, and it's called the Matari'i Holiday Act, and that was one of the few acts that's actually written into Te Reo Māori, and it became a law within New Zealand that every year we will celebrate the Matari'i holiday, and that is, for the most part, the process that we followed. I cannot stress enough about the importance of bringing together experts, Māori experts with cultural knowledge, to come together and to determine the holiday, its practice, its principles, and the dates. It's very vitally important. It was something that I couldn't do on my own, and I brought in all of these people on the committee are from different tribes, from different parts of the country. We brought everyone together so they could feed in to the creation of the holiday. Now, I would hazard a guess that many of the different islands here in Maui Nui will have slightly different practices, perhaps, different languages, different approaches at time. We're exactly the same. So we got into the room and not all of us agreed with the timing. Not all of us even agreed with Matari'i. In fact, there are some people that don't look to Matari'i as the marker of the year in this group. They look to the star Puanga or Raiju, which is another variation we have in Aotearoa. When we came into the room, we sat down and we decided not to look at the differences, but to look at the things that were similar across all of our practice. All of us agreed it was connected to the rising of a star in winter that was associated to the new year. We all agreed on the principles. We all agreed with the associationship to the lunar calendar. And it took us about 35 minutes in total to work out the process when we decided to focus on the similarities as opposed to the differences. Bearing in mind that in Aotearoa today, the Matari'i holiday is for the nation, but that doesn't mean individual community groups and regions and tribes adhere to the Matari'i Day. They practice their own cultural, tribal, location variation, and we support them to practice their unique approach to it. However, as a nation, we celebrate Matari'i based on our agreed principles and ideas. In 2022, we launched the public holiday at Te Papatongarewa in Wellington at our National Museum. This launch was this hautapu ceremony. It was a traditional ceremony. We cooked food for the stars and put them on an altar. We called out the names of the dead, and we had a series of karakia, a whole ceremony that was broadcast to 500,000 people live across the nation. And last year, my colleague here, Matari'i, led the national broadcast of the ceremony that took place in his hometown of Rotorua, along with his brother Iriwera Kepa. They led this celebration and the launch of Matari'i in 2023. And what we are doing is we are moving the celebration to different tribal areas, and every year a tribe puts their hand up and takes the lead to launch the celebration that's broadcast on television, and they put their localised flavour into their ceremony, but we still adhere to the dates and the principles. Just going to finish on some stats. Some of the stats that I think are important. Firstly, Māori make up 17% of the population of Aotearoa. And we were a little unsure as to how people would embrace the holiday. In the first year, 51% of the country's population did something to celebrate Matari'i. That is very big for us when you consider we are Māori are 17%. That is telling us that the vast majority of people who celebrated the holiday were non-Māori. Last year, it's 60%. And that's not just taking the day off. Those are people that attend celebrations or practice in their own house. Across communities, across the country, we have 3 million people going outside to look at stars, celebrating, feasting together, joining community groups, acknowledging the environment, planning for the future. We stop the entire nation at that day to celebrate Mātauranga Māori, or our Indigenous Māori knowledge systems. It happens on that day every single year. That's probably the fact that I'm most proud of in the entire process to establish Matari'i. Number two, there was a question about the cost of Matari'i. Now, this was not my focus because I really was not overly concerned with how much it cost. My concern was the celebration of Matari'i. But that is something that's very important for any government. It was estimated that it would cost $300 million. The spend into the New Zealand economy across the Matari'i weekend is $600 million. So it's actually made a profit as opposed to being a loss. And it wasn't something that we were focused on, but because people are coming together to feast, they are traveling, they are trying to get home, to be with their families and loved ones. It's become an internal journey for family members to come together. They spend times, they were particularly spending money in accommodation, into hospitality, travel, and arts. Because during this time, there's concerts, there's art exhibitions, there's so much art on display. We have a phrase that my colleague and Te Aorere Pewhairangi and Kimi Ora Melbourne put together, Matari'i Kāinga Hokia. Matari'i calls you home. Matari'i calls you home to celebrate with your family and friends. And we used it as a little bit of a tourism motto to encourage people to take that time to go home and celebrate Matari'i with their family and loved ones. And we weren't too sure how that was going to go, but it went, well, $600 million, I guess that's not too bad for a holiday that didn't have a focus on economic outcomes. Finally, I want to say to you all that it's such a privilege to be here, to be able to help you in any way that we can with your endeavours to re-establish your own practice of Matari'i. And if I can say to you, as a perhaps word of advice and encouragement, ka rangahia te ao Māori, ka rangahia ngā iwi o te moana nui ākiwa. Call us to support you and we will come. You are the homeland of us. This is our Hawaii. This is a place where our spirits return to. Once they make their journey with Matari'i, they come home here. And I encourage you to call us back to your homelands to celebrate with you the practice of Matari'i, because for us, our practice of Matari'i originates from here. Nō reira, e te iwi ka nui te mihi kia koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Merci professeur pour ce moment de transfert et de partage de connaissances. Ce fut un plaisir de vous écouter parler du savoir de nos Tupuna, dont le quotidien était rythmé par les étoiles et les constellations. Et c'est grâce à vos recherches et le résultante vis-à-vis du jour férié commémorant Matari'i qu'on peut effectuer un glissement vers notre équivalent maori, Matari'i, qui voit l'apparition des Pléiades aux alentours du 20 novembre. Une occasion de célébrer tous les ans à cette période la richesse de nos langues et cultures ancestrales. C'est en gardant cet objectif à l'esprit que je vais donner du temps pour que l'on puisse poser quelques brèves questions au professeur Matamua. Donc du coup, la discussion est ouverte avec notre professeur ici présent, en rappelant que le mieux c'est de faire des questions brèves et précises, puisque voilà, histoire qu'on arrive droit au but et que le plus de personnes puissent communiquer. Merci de votre compréhension.
Et merci beaucoup, professeur. Je pense que la traduction se fait simultanément. Voilà. Alors, je sais que vous allez rencontrer l'association Te Haururu, qui est plus spécialement, qui s'est en fait focalisée, prédestinée à chaque année à vivre ces cérémonies de manière très culturelle. Mais pour rebondir sur votre intervention, ce qui nous intéresse ici, c'est de connaître les étapes que vous avez dû franchir pour essayer de traduire en termes beaucoup plus officiels le Matari'i au niveau de l'Assemblée parlementaire de Nouvelle-Zélande, pour notamment faire de la date que vous avez évoquée dans votre exposé une date nationale, une date officielle dans l'agenda des jours brimés et des jours nationaux en Nouvelle-Zélande. Donc nous sommes, nous, une assemblée qui a la capacité de pouvoir légiférer, de pouvoir décider, de fixer une date qui sera dédiée au Matari'i, ici en Polynésie. Et pour partager l'expérience que vous avez eue, on aimerait connaître les étapes que vous avez franchies pour arriver à l'objectif que vous avez atteint. Maruru.
Tēnā koe. So initially, we were approached by the Prime Minister at the time, the Honourable Jacinda Ardern, who gave us the task of establishing the holiday. They had spoken about it as a party and as a government, that's what they wanted to do. So they approached myself and asked if I would lead that process. I quickly realised that that was something that was too big for an individual, and so I gathered in those experts, and we actually wrote down the deliverables that we thought that we would be responsible for. Number one was the principles of the holiday. Number two was the dates. And number three was to establish a process to inform the general population about what was happening. In that, there were so many other things that we dealt to. We undertook a mass program of informing the nation via online lectures, lectures in person. Most of those I did, and that wasn't just in Aotearoa. We travelled to Australia as well, a big population of New Zealanders in Australia. We did a tour of every city and the major towns and some of the very small communities as well across the country. I think there was over 10,000 people in person that came to those lectures. We had online television promotions, live lectures. Some of the content that has been produced has had over 10 million views. So it was saturated information. Then we went back with our recommendations to the Prime Minister and to the government. They tabled and the word I'm looking for when you...
Draft bill.
A draft bill. They tabled the bill, the draft, that went out for discussion. It was voted on and it passed, so it went through the first reading. After that, we had to go through a select committee process. The select committee process involved members from every party, and they brought their own individual parties' ideas, concerns, questions that I had to sit in on behalf of the advisory committee and answer. And that process took the bill to a second reading, and that was passed into the House. And after the second reading, a lot of work was done to actually establish the Matari'i Holiday Act that became law. It was after the second reading, and because I really wanted that written in te reo Māori, because of the association and the connection between language and cultural practice. So it was written into te reo Māori, which has its own issues within the New Zealand government, but we worked through it. And then in early 2022, it was read into Parliament as a bill, and it passed, and it was at that moment that it was established. The first holiday was in June 2022, But that was, in general, the process that we followed to get the bill through the House.
Merci.
Il reste un peu moins d'une heure, donc vous avez largement le temps de poser d'autres questions, donc n'hésitez pas.
Alors je vais poursuivre. Toujours en complément de la question que j'ai posée, pour éviter que la date du Matari'i ne soit juste une date officialisée à l'intérieur d'un calendrier et soit appréciée par la population juste en termes de jours non ouvrables, donc fériés. Comment vous avez fait pour faire prendre conscience à la population maorie, puisque c'est à elle que s'intéresse cette démarche que vous avez entreprise, la nécessité de vivre cette journée culturellement, plutôt qu'une simple journée où on ne travaille pas?
That is the importance and shows the importance of very good communications approach to the holiday. Our minister at the time of Māori, the Minister of Māori Development, was Calvin Davis. Calvin was very, very strong on the point of Matari'i not just being a holiday. Matari'i was more than a holiday. Matari'i is about identity and culture. And we have been impressing upon the nation through all of the promotional work that we do and all of the information that we share that it is greater than just a day off. In fact, for Māori, it's become quite a busy day because we spend our day looking after the rest of the country and running celebrations and organising events. It's become a very, very busy time for us. But in 2 years, what we have noticed is how Matari'i has become a pillar of our national identity. It really has, because the values and the principles connect to everyone at home. So the messaging was important, and just really reinforcing the values in every interview, in every lecture, in every piece of information we shared, and allowing others, everyone in Aotearoa, to celebrate it was really, really important.
J'ai déjà quelqu'un qui a une question encore dans le public.
Hei, kia ora nā tātou. Maruru mai te ei tā tātou wawara aparau. A wharonoa rana rato I te reo maohi. Te ia mahana, e ita te nuna a maohi e ora whaahura I rato I tōna ao. Te ao e ora hiara e te nuna ai te imahana e ao no rapai mai. Te roto tātou I te rā tārena tā o e paraurei ara ua e rae e tārena Gregorian. E te rira tārena e ere nā teie nuna. E no te rā mea e tārena e nā te rā tārena I whaahuru e roa I te orara atumu o teie nuna. Ia paraparau tātou I te parau no Matari'i. E ere ho e aura tā tātou e horo ara no Matari'i teie mahana, e te mea I ora hia e tō tātou mautupuna I muaru. Te Matari'i ni ai teie mahana, e te Matari'i raro, ai te huru e ra te orara o te nuna no te mea. E iwa ahuru ni e kāne reo tō tātou nuna, ere whaahauna te whenua e whaamura. Nā te mō whare toa nā kārwhūnuma. Iwa ahuru ni ai te anere. E te ia mhana i e paraparau tātua no Matari'i, e riro noa ona mai te tei pate anoa i te peu tumu, a tō tātou mautupuna. Te imi nei, i roto i tō tātou whenua i tēnei, ua taa te matahiti a pi a te papa, mahana Matamua no tēnuare. Ua taa toa te matahiti a pi a te tini tō iu nei. Ai tara e matahiti a pi tā te maorie. A hea te matahiti a pi a te maorie. Te nuna anō nei ho te whenua, te nuna anō nei ho te parau, ai tāna e oro a matahiti. E te e pupu e whaatere nei te e whenua i te e nei, e pupu e arata ei te nuna e rote te ti amara. Ia ti amara te e whenua, e hatana mhana whaai ara a uhipa. Tūna tanu ra mau te Matari'i nia, ai te tanu te rā mahana i whaariro i mahana uhipa ore. Mahana whetura a te rā. Mahana whaapura a te rā. Nā rota tu i hotu whaahau te i whenua. I ho i roto i whaapu. I te whenua e hotu i te i pārheira a whaauhu au. Hare tātou e ono awa e Matari'i nia. E roto i te rā Matari'i nia, te rā mauta ata, mātau i te hare tanu maa, au rātou noa hoa te hare whaapu. E oti Matari'i raro, te rā mauta ata e hare i Matari'i raro, hare noa rei te whaapu, o rātou noa hoa te hare whaapu. Te toe a. Whare toa, whare mai, menema. Mana ona o te hipa Matamua e tano tātou e hio. Whaafaro ahora e tātou tārena orara. Te waira te tārena maohi. Te i awa e o māti, iau te tārena Gregorian. Tōna rā tano ra au tātou maohi. O pipiri te i awa e. Whaahu i te awa e tupa e nei. Mea mai te ihi o ahu tā tātou tārena. E hi o tā tātou matahiti a pi maohi, ini ai whenua maohi nui. E arata i tō tātou whenua i ti amara, i ti amara, nā whanahau tu e tera mahana, oro ano ti amara au te whenua. E rira noa tō umana a maururu.
Merci. Du coup, est-ce qu'il y a encore des questions dans le public? Tu voulais...
Est-ce qu'il y a une réponse à ça ou... Non. Ok. Merci. Merci au professeur Matamua pour d'abord pour l'effort pédagogique d'avoir pu venir ici dans cette enceinte, notamment devant nous tous, exposer la compréhension dans le monde maori et aussi la pratique chez nos cousins maoris de cet événement communément appelé Matari'i ou Matari'i. je crois qu'il faut saluer aussi cette démarche, et il faut saluer toute la démarche qui a consisté de la part aussi, je crois, de la vice-présidence et des associations peut-être qui ont contribué à ce que ça puisse se faire, à l'Assemblée bien sûr, d'avoir permis cet échange. Je n'aurai pas la même tonalité que notre représentant Tapati, même si le fond de son discours est d'une pertinence tranchante. J'ai envie de voir les choses un petit peu différemment, si vous le souhaitez, et j'en profite puisque Madame la Consul est présente aussi, et il y a un staff qui est là, et la vice-présidence est là aussi, et beaucoup d'élus de notre Assemblée sont là. Certes, beaucoup plus de la majorité que l'opposition, mais après tout, c'est la voix du peuple qui est présente. J'ai envie de voir les choses d'une autre façon, si vous me permettez, au soutien de la démarche qui est en cours, au soutien de cette démarche d'officialisation de la fête ou de la célébration du marqueur de temps que l'on a reconnu ici comme étant Matari'i, marqueur de saison, associé au mouvement d'une certaine constellation. Donc c'est un marqueur de temps culturel, traditionnel, associé finalement au mouvement ascendant ou descendant d'une constellation parmi tant d'autres, les Pléiades. Et en fait, je m'aperçois que ce n'est pas les seules similitudes que nous avons entre Maohi Nui et le monde maori. Et d'ailleurs avec Hawaï et avec Rapa Nui. Il y a d'autres concepts, celui-là est celui qui est mis en exergue aujourd'hui, Matari'i, le marqueur de temps, et on essaye de tisser des liens et d'une compréhension interculturelle qui finalement est ancestralement déjà la même. On est conscient que c'est finalement la même source. Et maintenant, on est dans une mise en pratique de process différents à partir de contextes finalement coloniaux et politiques et géostratégiques différents, suivant que nous soyons dans l'hémisphère sud ou l'hémisphère nord. Il y a la pirogue qui nous relie, il y a la pieuvre, la grande pieuvre polynésienne qui relie aussi, il y a le chemin des âmes, il y a la généalogie, il y a en fait quasiment toute une civilisation commune qui nous réunit en fait. Pas uniquement d'ailleurs entre nos deux pays, mais au moins en tout cas en ce qui nous concerne cet après-midi. Ce n'est donc pas la seule similitude et le seul tissage ancestral sur lequel nous devrions nous pencher. En fait, c'est là que j'ai envie d'amener la discussion. Mais il faut commencer par des stigmates et des concepts communs. Et je crois d'ailleurs qu'une meilleure appropriation de ces concepts serait beaucoup plus pertinente si l'ensemble était reconnu comme étant le même, plutôt que de confronter, en fait, les choses ou de les comparer, ou voire de les explorer ou d'essayer de les reconnecter au XXIe siècle. Je crois qu'il faudrait repartir d'ailleurs de la source commune pour finalement laisser les choses se faire beaucoup plus naturellement, malgré les approches scientifiques qu'on peut avoir, que ce soit universitairement parlant, scientifiquement parlant, ou alors culturellement parlant, et pourquoi pas d'ailleurs politiquement parlant. Tout est lié. Tout est lié. Mais les enjeux actuels du Pacifique, que ce soit en termes de géostratégie, sont tels que c'est bien ce mouvement commun et cette source commune culturelle qu'il faut mettre en avant, c'est ce triangle polynésien qu'il faut mettre en avant. C'est finalement ce concept qui est beaucoup plus ancestral encore, même si le triangle en lui-même est une géométrie qui n'est pas forcément polynésienne, mais ce concept qui relie transnational qui relie les différents peuples du triangle polynésien, ça, c'est très océanien. Et ça, c'est notre fibre commune. Donc, Matari'i n'est que l'expression d'une facette de cette, finalement, civilisation commune. Et il faut commencer par le commencement. Mais je voudrais dire qu'il y a quelques années, il y a un site sur EATA déjà qui a été classé à l'UNESCO dans cette finalité. C'est le site du Mardi qui a été classé en 2017 depuis une démarche qui a duré 12 années pour permettre de servir de support ancestral dans cette reconnexion moderne et contemporaine de nos peuples. Et les gouvernements donc ont déjà tranché un certain 9 août 2017 à Cracovie, en Pologne. 21 pays se sont mis d'accord pour adopter et labelliser le Mardi sur la liste du patrimoine mondial comme étant le stigmate, mais aussi le miroir d'une civilisation commune à laquelle nous et vous appartenez. C'est peut-être sous cette égide-là, qu'il faille reconnecter les concepts comme Matari'i, comme les pirogues traditionnelles transocéaniques, comme les sentiers des âmes, comme le rôle des valeurs communes véhiculées par cette fameuse grande pieuvre polynésienne, et ainsi de suite. Le fait que vous soyez dépositaire, finalement, par excellence, en Aotearoa, de la généalogie, comme aucun autre peuple de notre triangle polynésien n'a encore réussi, est un talent que vous avez conservé et que vous avez cultivé à l'intérieur de ce pays, de ce magnifique pays que vous avez. Et nous avons nous-mêmes aussi cultivé d'autres talents, mais qui finalement contribuent à la même grande famille polynésienne. Donc je voudrais ouvrir le débat, et non pas pour refermer le débat sur une moralisation, bien évidemment, mais plutôt pour ouvrir la question de savoir si ce n'est pas ce fameux triangle polynésien qu'il faille cultiver, dans lequel nous mettrions tous ces concepts ensemble, pour ne parler que d'une seule voix face aux enjeux d'une modernisation et d'une géopolitique qui risque effectivement de nous étouffer ou de nous confiner une nouvelle fois. Merci.
Tēnā koe. Thank you for those words, which I wholeheartedly agree. Being here for the last few days has just highlighted how similar we are in many of our, not just our language and our practices, but the positions we are as Indigenous people and as relations who live often beneath the cloak of another nation or another governing body, perhaps is the best way for me to put that. And so we have similar experiences and similar challenges. But I want to thank you for those words. One of the things that wherever you go in Polynesia, if there's something that in the record that unites us is our practice around Matari'i, makaliki, makahiki. It's right throughout all of our islands. And while our practice and our acknowledgement of it did begin here, when we've travelled to another part of the globe, its appearance and the timing of it wasn't the same. So we did adjust our viewing of it. We do not have Matari'i I runga, Matari'i I raro. We have Matari'i in the sky for 11 months of the year. It's missing for a month, and when it reappears after going missing, we begin our new year. So we had to adjust our practice because we have different environment, different resources, and the sky looks different as well, slightly. But in saying that, those principles of Matari'i seem to be universal right throughout all of our people. And if there's one way for that to act as a point of unification for all of us, I think also about the wheke, about the octopus and its 8 tentacles built around the head of the octopus, which is like the stars in Matari'i, with the head or the central one being here, and all of its tentacles spreading out like the different stars in the cluster, each with its own purpose and meaning, but all of them interconnected and related back to the well-being of all of us. I think that's a really powerful analogy, and perhaps something that we need to consider as a wider whānau here in Te Moana Nui Ākiwa. Ngā mihi nui.
Si vous me permettez, j'ajoute peut-être un petit peu à côté de ce que le professeur vient de dire, parce que vous avez cité un peu le contexte actuel dans la région. Juste pour citer 2 mécanismes qui existent déjà, qui vont exactement dans ce sens. Donc il y a déjà le Polynesian Leaders Group, dans laquelle la Polynésie est membre, et qui contribue à augmenter le voix de la Polynésie en tant que leaders dans la région. Et comme j'ai cité tout à l'heure, aussi le Forum des îles du Pacifique, que la Polynésie et la Calédonie sont membres à part entière depuis 2013. Et le Forum des îles du Pacifique a été très clair dans la déclaration de Boué, surtout, que le plus grand souci qui confronte notre région, c'est la lutte contre le changement climatique, les effets du changement climatique. Et c'est très important en ce moment que nous, en tant que membres du forum, membres de la région, qu'on utilise l'unité du forum et le Polynesian Leaders Group en dessous de ça, pour continuer de mettre ce qui est dans nos intérêts en avant. Et puis, je pense que tout est lié, parce que Matari'i, ça parle de l'environnement. Et le forum a été très clair dans ses déclarations que ce qui nous intéresse, c'est les changements actuels au climat. Et c'est ça qui nous pose le plus grand souci. Donc, j'ajoute un petit peu ça, parce que pour la Nouvelle-Zélande, c'est très important. On attache beaucoup d'importance qu'on continue de travailler au biais des mécanismes qui existent déjà, y compris les mécanismes que la Polynésie fait déjà partie. Merci.
Merci. On a déjà une question en préparation.
Yorana and Marururua for your presentation. First of all, I want to pay my respect to our Maori leaders and to you, to your ancestors past and present, and to your community. So my question is the following. I just wonder if, Matari'i and her children as living entities have been challenged by climate issues, and how do you guys, the way you guys read the movement of the constellations have also been challenged by the climate issues that we are facing. And on the other hand, I wonder if the celebrations of Matari'i in Aotearoa have changed or have also been challenged by the climate consequences. Maruru.
Kia ora. The climate change has had a significant impact upon our viewing and practice of Matari'i. There are a number of species of flora and fauna, of animals that are connected to that cluster that are just no longer there in the same numbers for us to interact with them. The reading of the cluster for us is becoming more difficult because particularly for us, its connection to some of the winter months and some of the winter phenomenon that are really, really important part of our environment are no longer happening because it's just very, very warm now. So we've noticed that change. So we're having to adjust our practice. But one of the good things about Matari'i is we are trying to make people responsible for the environment during the period of Matari'i. So because the different stars are connected to the different parts of the environment, during the Matari'i period, we ask the nation, so what has been your commitment to fresh water? That star within the cluster. What has been your commitment to the oceans? That star in a cluster. How are you caring for tipuanuku, the land? What is your connection and responsibility back to the land? What is your responsibility back to the forest and all of the creatures? So even though that we've noticed a change, we are using Matari'i as a platform to reaffirm our environmental practices and our positions. It's something that people are really starting to connect with. So we have groups now who make Matari'i's a time for wishing for the prosperity of the future, but most of those wishes are connected to the environment. So we're getting people to commit themselves to doing things like cleaning up waterways or planting trees or caring for particular species as part of their ongoing commitment to Matari'i. So in terms of that environmental impact, it has been one of those really significant elements of acknowledging Matari'i that we've seen grow since its inception.
Yorana, merci pour votre exposé, monsieur le professeur. Moi, c'est sur le plan professionnel que je voudrais vous poser la question. Moi, je suis un passionné de la Terre. Ma question, en Nouvelle-Zélande, est-ce que vos agriculteurs multiplient les actions pendant cette période de Matari'i uniquement, ou bien c'est en suivant un calendrier lunaire? Ici, on parle en Polynésie, on m'a toujours appris qu'il faudrait faire la plantation et suivre le calendrier lunaire, c'est-à-dire c'est Tani, la lune Tani ici chez nous en Polynésie. Et le Polynésien, il y a 30 ans, on ne connaissait pas Matari'i Matar'i. Depuis qu'on a adopté de suivre Matari'i, on remarque bien la saison d'abondance et la saison de non-abondance. C'est ça ma question. Est-ce que vos agriculteurs multiplient les actions uniquement pendant toute l'année de Matari'i, ou bien c'est suivant le calendrier lunaire? Merci.
Tēnā koe. In the past 20 years, there has been a huge increase in the practice of maramataka, or the lunar calendar systems. Most of that is driven around planting, harvesting, and to some extent fishing. But it's very, very much connected to our planting cycles. We have a different seasonality. So I guess I would suspect here you could probably plant more. We have one planting season, one harvest season, because we go into this very deep, cold period where there's frosts and snows and not a lot will grow. So our season is a little bit different, but we still follow the lunar cycle to plant. It has grown significantly in the past 20 years. We have records of over 500 various lunar calendar systems in Aotearoa because they are so regional and so resource specific. Some are dedicated solely to ocean fishing, some are dedicated to freshwater fishing, some are dedicated to birding, and a lot of them are dedicated to gardening. So the practice is increasing. A lot of schools are having maramataka as programs within their education system. In fact, many of our Māori schools are now following the maramataka and Matari'i and the environment for their schooling year, so they no longer have holidays that adhere to a Western cycle. They will have holidays that fit in with the Māori lunar calendar cycle, so we run virtually opposite to the Western cycle for holidays in some of our Māori schools. So they will have their big holidays in the middle of winter, when our ancestors took time off to celebrate and to feast and stay home, and they will go and be most active in those summer months when you're meant to be out and active in the environment. Whereas our mainstream schools have their holidays in the summertime when the environment is active, and then go to school when it's cold and it's not, the environment isn't active. So we have seen a significant change, particularly within Māori communities. But across the industry of agriculture and horticulture, there isn't the adherence to our lunar calendar systems and our environmental systems, because those are very manipulated soils and environments where they're often fertilised, a lot of phosphate and a lot of fertilising going into the soil, so they just go off their regular cycle as opposed to following our traditional maramataka. But it's very, very big at home, and it's starting to impact particularly on our Māori communities.
On a déjà la prochaine question, juste pour rappeler qu'il reste moins d'une demi-heure, donc encore le temps de réfléchir.
Yorana tatou, tina oro peti te himini. Haere mai te manuhiri, haere mai. No te ti, no te ta, haere mai.
Haere mai.
Whari mei te tap ono te arofa. Te arofa atura i te mautupuna. E parhei meira i roto i a tatou. E arofa atoa i to tatou mohua ai. No ratou hoi tatou i one. En 2011, avec notre association de Moria, nous avons fait un déplacement à Aotearoa et nous avons été accueillis par Matari'i à Rotorua. Ensuite, quelques années plus tard, nous l'avons accueilli à Moria pour, à l'occasion de la création officielle de notre association, en présence de Papa Matari'i. Et puis, il nous expliquait en fait le logo de Maorie. Il disait que ce sont deux mamans qui donnent le sein aux enfants Maoris et que le lait de la maman, c'est la métaphore de la distribution de la connaissance à l'enfant. Et Papa Matari'i nous expliquait aussi qu'avant d'arriver au contenant du lait, on doit se mettre d'accord sur le contenu. Et donc, il y a eu cela implique des discussions dans vos marais. Et donc, ces discussions-là peuvent durer plusieurs heures, comme plusieurs jours apparemment, jusqu'à ce que vous tombiez d'accord. Donc, ma question revient sur la création de la commission d'experts. Comment vous avez procédé pour identifier les membres de cette commission? Comment se sont passés les débats? Comment ils sont arrivés à une voie commune? Quelles ont été les concessions des uns et des autres? Et puis je voulais pour finir vous remercier parce que vous rétablissez le lien entre la culture et la nature. Et pour rétablir ce lien, vous avez rétabli le dialogue entre gestion de la nature et avis populaire. Et ne pas tenir compte uniquement de l'avis de l'élite. Et pour moi, c'est très important. J'espère en tous les cas qu'ici, au Fénois, on va procéder de la même manière Et d'ailleurs, je salue votre combat au niveau de l'UNESCO, puisque vous avez pu intégrer un nouveau critère qui est celui des communautés pour l'inscription des biens sur le patrimoine mondial de l'UNESCO. Donc, maruru maitei.
Maruru. The selection of people to be part of the Matari'i Advisory Committee was pretty much a foregone conclusion, if I'm honest. There were very, very few people, experts in Aotearoa who work within this field. There are pockets of practitioners, but they, at the period when we set up the committee, there were less than 10 people who were considered an expert in that space. And we went to those people, and I personally went and saw them in person to ask if they would be part of the committee. We know each other, and we've worked together for a number of years. And so I went, and we're from different tribes, all of us, from the top of the north to the bottom of the south, west coast, east coast, and in the middle. And so really the notion of talking about a Maori New Year is not correct, because if we were to, my New Year would be slightly different to my neighbour up the road, and another tribe would follow something different. I have a suspicion that most Polynesians are like that anyway, but we are very tribal and have our own approaches. So when we did come together, the selection was done. I made the selection, but I also talked to some other community groups as to who they would put forward, and they were the same names that I had come up with anyway, so we pulled them together. There were some discussions about a Māori New Year, because even the word Māori for us is something that we see as a colonised term, as something that labels us all the same, whereas we see ourselves as very tribal for the most part. So trying to get everyone to agree on anything can be quite an issue. So we set aside our differences and we spoke about what were our similar practices, what all of us could agree upon. And that's where we started to make really quick traction. Everyone in that group agreed that the Māori New Year, or their New Year practice, begins in the winter. And so we had the season. Then we agreed that it was driven by the rising of a star. So we had the actual month. So it was like the sun, star, moon approach. We had the general, yes, winter, it's the season, it's connected to stars, and it's connected to a lunar phase. And so we just spoke about how each of us have a slightly different approach, but we all agreed that the rising of Matari'i in a particular month, and then we followed the appropriate lunar calendar date, and we all agreed. Now there was some of the people on the committee who don't even look to Matari'i. They have a different marker. But they realised for the need of a national marker to unite all of us, that Matari'i would be the marker, because the vast majority of tribes in Aotearoa follow Matari'i, not alternatives. So we looked at the similarities. But if I can say, what we're doing is we're allowing each of the tribal areas and communities to celebrate it in their own way on their own date. So we have one national holiday. That gives us a national event that we celebrate collectively. Some communities are earlier, some communities are later, based on their regional knowledge. And we don't try and suppress that. In fact, we try and elevate and highlight that. So this year, our celebration of Matari'i will be broadcast from the South Island. That group of people and that tribe follow a different rising of a star, of a different star. But we will give them the platform to show their unique language and culture at that event. But it still falls under the auspice of the Matari'i holiday.
Il reste 20 minutes à peu près. Et on a déjà une question.
Et kahanu autonomie Eliane te yamai yaune vavika teni putuya tot hainu. Je remercie donc la vice-présidente qui m'a invité à participer à cette conférence sur Matari'i. Je crois que c'est comme chez vous, nous n'avons pas de Matari'i raro et de Matari'i ni, on a un seul Matari'i. C'est ce que j'ai pu retenir de nos anciens, c'est que leur version, c'est de dire que lorsque Matari'i apparaît à l'horizon, c'est la nouvelle année. Mais maintenant, comme vous l'avez si bien stipulé avec le calendrier grégorien, nous avons adopté aussi, donc essayé d'appliquer cette apparition de Matari'i avec le calendrier grégorien, mais qui ne correspond pas du tout. Alors, pour nous, Matari'i, sur le calendrier grégorien, c'est le mois de mai. Voilà. Alors que la réalité n'en est pas là. Ce que simplement je voudrais poser comme question, comment... Alors vous avez expliqué à un moment donné à la personne qui vous a interrogé tout à l'heure, comment vous avez réussi à unir donc toutes ces tribus. Il faut bien le dire parce que c'est pas facile. Nous, on est confrontés aussi au niveau de notre archipel des Marquises à cette problématique qui est donc des îles. Et nous avons 6 îles habitées et des parlers assez différents, mais nous avons réussi à unifier donc ces 6 îles à travers notre culture. Et c'est ce qui a réussi à faire en sorte de laisser de côté toutes les questions tribales, claniques, pour essayer donc de se retrouver dans cette unité de ce peuple que l'on appelait donc Enana. Donc, ce que vous avez fait donc, dans vos recherches, à travers donc l'astronomie, c'est très important parce que nous aussi, nous connaissons pas mal, c'est ce qu'on appelle nous, chez nous, des tautou, les saisons. On ne dit pas les mois, mais les saisons. Nous avons donc 11 saisons, enfin, si on peut appeler des mois. Nous avons aussi nos nuits qui ont des noms. Et nous utilisons surtout ces noms de nuits pour l'agriculture. Exemple, la pleine lune, on ne le dit pas chez nous dans mon île comme dans les autres îles. Tout la pleine lune. Tout. Et les autres îles disent Hotunui. Et à partir de là, nous avons donc notre timing, si l'on veut, pour nous référer au moment donc de la culture et de l'agriculture. Comme aujourd'hui, un de nos collègues à présent aujourd'hui citait que c'est vrai que beaucoup ont abandonné parce que on vit dans le modernisme. Mais est-ce que vous avez rencontré ces difficultés aussi de réunir, d'unir toutes les tribus maoris? Voilà ma question. Sous cette égide donc de Matari'i.
Tēnā koe. I would hate for me to have misled you, for you to think that all Māori tribes agree with the process that we have in place. For the most part, there's been the acceptance, but there are still individuals and still others who don't fully support the holiday, but that's to be expected with anything. That's human nature. One of the important things for me was getting experts from the various tribal regions, because by doing that, all of those different tribes and regions, for the most part, felt like they had a voice at the table. And they did. We, just as you were talking, recalls to mind the fact that we followed a very traditional approach to our meetings and our gatherings. It was a governmental sponsored advisory committee. We were appointed by the government, but we did not follow a government process. We went to the marae and we followed a Māori process, and we had open and frank discussions, and we spoke about each other's knowledge systems, and we laid it on the table and we came to conclusions. So I think by following our traditional approaches, in this instance for us, it worked extremely well, and it was our traditions that allowed us to unite everyone and get the holiday over the line. So I completely understand when you're talking about having 6 different dialects, probably 6 different approaches. We have six different approaches within one tribe at times. So trying to get everyone on the same page can be difficult, but it was by adhering to our traditional practices. Everyone in that advisory group were either fluent speakers of te reo Māori or were proficient. And our business was conducted in te reo Māori, which really helped with getting the agreement from everyone. If I can just pick up the point of the first bit, perhaps, of your discussion around the lunar calendar and the fact that it doesn't fit with a Gregorian calendar, and because they're just completely 2 different systems of time. They don't work well together. They have different markers of time and different, they're fueled by different systems. One only concerned about our trip around the sun, that's it. But if you're following a Polynesian calendar, you concern yourself with sun, star, moon, fish, tree, season, bird, everything. It becomes this very complex, rhythmic, fluidic system of time. And trying to take a rigid solar Gregorian calendar date and place it over the top of a environmentally driven calendar usually doesn't work. And so we let our environmental calendar lead the dates for Matari'i. That's why it will move every year up and down the calendar system. Now, I'm not saying we cast away the Gregorian calendar, but what we've been working on in Aotearoa is adhering to a dual system of time. So we always know where we are in our Gregorian calendar, and at the same time we always know where we are in our environmental, lunar, solar, stellar system of time, and that way we can track where we are. I mean, we're bilingual, most of you are multilingual. If you can speak multilingually, then I don't know if, I think we should be able to tile the time in different ways as well. Ka nui te mihi.
Taunui et vice-président, j'aimerais bien les inviter chez moi en marquise. Hein? Comment on fait? Merci beaucoup.
Maruru, maruru.
Et il reste un peu plus de 5 minutes. Est-ce qu'il y a une dernière question ou on peut finir sur ces mots? Oui.
Thank you very much. I want to say congratulations for your work. I'm always impressed and amazed by the work that Maori do to recognize their culture and also put it back the culture in Aotearoa, in your country. In 2022, I had the opportunity to take part of a conference in Otepoti at the University of Otago, and I was really amazed. It was incredible how Pakeha shown respect and let the Maori culture be part of the conference. I think I never saw that in Tahiti, but it's very sad. So we have so much to learn from what you did, what Maori did in your country. I think we still have to get out of the colonization of thoughts that don't help us to reach your level. So I don't have question. I just want to thank you for your incredible presentation, and you are very, very inspiring. Thank you.
Tēnā koe, I just did want to reply to that though and say thank you. I have never seen Matari'i as part of a process of decolonisation. I see our practice and the introduction of Matari'i as indigenisation, and we're indigenising our spaces. I find sometimes when we talk decolonisation is we use colonisation as the starting point for understanding what we do and who we are. I think that, and for my mental mindset, Matari'i, we've always been indigenous. We've always been indigenous, and I don't think that we should allow ourselves to view colonisation as a starting point of anything. So I see what we do as indigenising our world and our spaces, and indigenising all of the people in Aotearoa. It's a way for us to indigenise them as well. If 60% of our population celebrate, and we only 17% of the population, it's telling me that the vast majority of people who are celebrating Matari'i are non-Māori. Number one. Number two, it is celebrated in every school in the country, not just Māori medium schools, but mainstream schools organically. And if you were to come home, and here's a good example, Matari'i is a language teacher, te reo Māori teacher. Māori have issues getting into te reo Māori programs because they're full of non-Māori learning the language. I think that's a way of how we are able to progress some of this stuff is by sharing it and everyone in the nation having a connection. Matari'i is about nation building. It's about finding those common human traits and principles that unite all of us, but wrapping that in our wonderful culture. The richness and diversity and beauty of our culture is the thing, it's the fibre that binds those principles together. And if we can share that and everyone connects with it, that's the power of Indigenous knowledge, that's the power of Matari'i Māori, and that's Matari'i at its essence.
Et je pense qu'on peut finir là-dessus. J'aimerais qu'on applaudisse très fort Rangi pour ce moment de partage, pour avoir ramené ces valeurs de nos ancêtres ici. Merci à tous ceux qui ont participé à alimenter le débat par la suite, en vous souhaitant du coup une bonne soirée à toutes et à tous.
Est-ce que je peux demander aux élus de venir devant? On va prendre une photo avec l'équipe. S'il vous plaît.
Allez, c'est le moment de la photo de famille. Donc, avant de vous éloigner, on vous invite à vous rendre devant pour la petite photo. Merci beaucoup. C'est pas tous les jours qu'on a une éminence culturelle à notre assemblée, donc autant immortaliser ce moment.